Tutankhamun and the Golden Age of the Pharaohs by Zahi Hawass, read by Rain Stoker. The civilization of the Pharaohs has long stood as a beacon to the world, a symbol of what is possible when people work together toward common goals. The kings of Egypt ruled for thousands of years over a land of harmony and prosperity, building pyramids that still stand tall, tunneling elaborate underground tombs, and erecting great temples to the gods. Egyptian artisans, and craftsmen were the most skilled in the world, producing masterpieces of sculpture and exquisite jewels for all to admire, and for other cultures to imitate. Although the pharaohs waged war when they had to, the ancient Egyptians valued tranquility and reconciliation and signed the first peace treaty in history. Using diplomacy instead of force, they married the sisters and daughters of their former enemies and brought young princes from vassal states to be raised with their own sons. As modern Egyptians, we follow in the path laid down by our ancestors and strive for harmony and peace among nations. We have suffered greatly from war and believe that the time for bloodshed is over. We must speak to one another in the language of civilization, and the beautiful monuments and artifacts that are the legacy of the pharaohs provide us with a unique means of communication. Egypt offers these beautiful objects from the tomb of Tutankhamun, along with equally exquisite pieces from the era that preceded him, in a spirit of peace and goodwill. Study of the past can illuminate the future, and by talking to one another and working together, we can strive to build a new era of greatness. Culture is the bridge on which peoples meet to resolve political differences and instabilities, for culture is a reflection of the integrity of human conscience and enlightenment. This, in turn, is an expression of our present and of our long history, which together have shaped the main features of international relations. The exhibition of Tutankhamun comes to the United States of America with a noble message that gains its credibility and validity from centuries of ancient Egyptian history and wisdom. This noble message is a message of peace, the peace that the world seeks. It is also an enlightened message that encourages dialogue among civilizations with the aim of helping all nations reach a common future. This future should depend on culture as a major instrument for comprehensive peace. Since the discovery of his tomb in 1922, Tutankhamun has fascinated the world. His name alone conjures up images of glittering gold and gleaming jewels, of riches beyond the imagination, and of a life cut tragically short. His treasures have attracted millions of visitors, both to their permanent home in Cairo and to traveling exhibitions that have circled the globe. Only about 8 or 9 years old when he came to the throne in about 1332 BC, Tutankhamun was heir to an immense realm that stretched north almost to the Euphrates River and south to the fourth cataract of the Nile. His principal allies and his main rivals for regional supremacy were the Hittites in modern-day Turkey and Syria, and the Babylonians and Assyrians who lived in what is now Iraq. The Mycenaean Greeks dominated the Aegean. By the time Tutankhamun was born, Egypt had been a superpower for almost 2 centuries and had been in periodic conflict with its neighbors for most of this time. The kings who came before him had fought to build an empire, conquering the lands to the south and forcing the city-states to the north into vassaldom. The booty these monarchs brought back from their campaigns poured into the royal coffers and the treasure houses of the principal state god, Amun. Amenhotep II, Tutankhamun's putative great-great-grandfather, was the last warrior king of his line. He began his reign with war and ended it with the promise of a peace that came to fruition under his son, Thutmose IV, who married the daughters of Egypt's oldest enemies instead of confronting them on the battlefield. The next monarch, Amenhotep III, inherited a stable kingdom and access to unmatched wealth. But this moment of calm was not to last. 2 decades before Tutankhamun ascended the throne, a new player stepped onto the stage of Egyptian history. Eldest surviving son of Amenhotep III and his great queen Tiye, The heretic pharaoh Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti changed the state religion of Egypt, closing the temples of the great state gods and dedicating their extensive holdings to the sun disk Aten. Some see this controversial king as a saint, others as a monster. Many scholars believe that Tutankhamun was his son. Soon after he became king, Tutankhamun rejected the teachings of Akhenaten, bringing back the traditional religion and restoring the wealth and power of Amun. When he died after fewer than 10 years on the throne, he was laid to rest in a small tomb in the Valley of the Kings, a remote canyon on the west bank of the Nile. In Thebes, Tutankhamun passed away without an heir, as did his elderly successor, Ai. Perhaps because of his association with the hated Akhenaten, the next kings wiped his name from the annals of history. Little did they know that by erasing his existence from official records, they would be ensuring that his name would live forever. While all of the later royal tombs were robbed and their treasures scattered to the winds, Tutankhamun's remained untouched, hidden beneath the sands. On November 4, 1922, English archaeologist Howard Carter found the long-forgotten burial, a discovery that fired the imagination of the public. For the next decade, the world watched in amazement as thousands of objects of gold, alabaster, semi-precious stone, precious wood, and glass, each piece more astonishing than the last, poured from the tomb's packed chambers and traveled to their permanent home at the Cairo Museum. In 1961, some of Tutankhamun's treasures left Egypt for the first time. Other traveling exhibitions followed. Between 1961 and 1981, thousands of people stood in line for hours to catch a glimpse of these riches as they were displayed around the world. In the late 1970s, a special exhibition of 50 of the best objects from the womb launched a frenzy of touchmania. The West has always been fascinated by the world of the pharaohs. The ancient Greeks and Romans were the first Egyptophiles, adopting the cults of certain Egyptian gods and developing the first Egyptian-style sculpture. After the Arab invasion of Egypt, the pharaonic past was hidden from most Western eyes for centuries, until Renaissance scholars rediscovered the wonders of the ancient world. In the 15th and 16th centuries, cities such as Rome erected obelisks, and practitioners of the fine and decorative arts began to incorporate Egyptian elements into their work. Napoleon's expedition to Egypt in 1798 prompted still more curiosity, and Egyptomania, expressed in art, architecture, and even opera, continued to grow. The discovery of Tutankhamun pushed ancient Egypt to the forefront of public awareness. Advertisers of products from cigarettes to soap borrowed Egyptian images and themes. Top-end clothing designers turned to pharaonic art for ideas, and car makers even produced a beetle-like automobile called the Scarab. The Art Deco movement was heavily indebted to ancient Egypt for its forms and details. Hollywood jumped on the bandwagon, producing many films, such as The Mummy, exploiting the pharaonic era. Tutankhamun and ancient Egypt continue to inspire books, movies, clothes, advertising campaigns, art, and architecture, and the public's thirst for both scientific knowledge and mystical truths from the land of the pharaohs seems insatiable. 2 decades ago, the cobra on the headdress of the goddess Salket, that once guarded Tutankhamun's canopic chest, was damaged while traveling in Germany. Expert conservators were able to restore the goddess to her original glory, and she is now back in Cairo. As a result of this accident, as well as an increasing awareness of the unavoidable wear and tear of travel on objects, the Egyptian parliament requested that the treasures of the king not leave the country again. This ban held for over 20 years, denying an entire generation, at least those not fortunate enough to come to Egypt themselves, the opportunity to see artifacts from Tutankhamun's tomb. In 2002, representatives of the Anti-Ken Museum Basel approached Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities and proposed a new traveling exhibition featuring the treasures of Tutankhamun. Due in large part to the excellent relationship that Switzerland and Egypt enjoy, the parliament agreed to allow a carefully chosen selection of pieces to travel, so that the world could once again experience the wonders of the boy king firsthand. After Basel, the exhibition went to Bonn, Germany, and then to the United States, where it will be on display at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Museum of Art in Fort Lauderdale, and the Field Museum in Chicago, and the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia.